The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Elizabeth Perez from Chicago, and you are on the fiscal year 2017 HUD CoC Competition Advanced Training. With me is Renee Crolius, so we will be talking to you about how to complete your project application in eSnap. So before we go ahead and get started, a few housekeeping rules. All lines have been muted, and throughout this presentation, you do have the ability to submit questions through the chat box. We will have an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation, and if time allows, we will open up the lines for calls. So we do ask you, if we do have time to open up the line for calls, just make sure that your mic is working, so that way you can feel free to speak to us and let us know what your question is, and if not, use the phone option. So we'd like to welcome you. Just so you know, we have had a new director start, so we'll take this opportunity to let you know who our team is. We have Dave Thomas, that is the Vice President of Community Partnerships, Karen Kowal, Director of Programs, myself, Elizabeth Perez, a Program Manager, and Renee Crolius, also a Program Manager. On your screen, you'll see our learning objectives for today's webinar. So the main reason is so you can understand the content about the Renewal project application and the CoC competition process. We will be doing a quick overview of the HUD Exchange resources for the Renewal applications. And hopefully after today's webinar, you will understand how to complete your Renewal project application for each HUD CoC grant for this upcoming fiscal year 2017 HUD CoC competition. But before we go ahead and start all that, we're just going to take a quick poll to see what type of HUD CoC funded project you have. So your screen should show the poll. So go ahead and complete that. Just check off if you have multiple projects. Go ahead and check off what type of projects you have at your agency. And we'll just give you a quick couple of minutes just to go ahead and complete. We just want to get a sense of who's in the webinar room. All right, so it looks like we had a lot of people responding. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one out. All right, I thought you'd see the screen where you'd be able to see. So we have the majority of you have permanent supportive housing. So we have 80% on the line that have that type of project. 31% is for transitional housing, 9% for supportive services only, and 3% of safe haven. So welcome everyone, and thank you for doing that. So on our agenda for today, we'll briefly be discussing today's funding environment and review the process, deadlines, and resources. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be going quickly over the Renewal project applications in eSnap, so just walking you through the steps-by-steps. I know it's been a year since we've all done this process, so it's always good to just do a quick refresher. And then finally, we'll be doing a couple of slides on how to submit, when to submit your first draft and your final draft, and to where. And then if we have time at the end, we'll open it up for questions and answers. But again, feel free to submit any questions in the chat box. And if we have time, we'll kind of take a brief pause and just answer that question. And if not, we'll hold them at the end. If we do run out of time, we will be developed a frequently asked questions document. So here at All Chicago, we'll be kind of tracking all those questions submitted in the event that we have to post something, so that way it's useful for everyone to review. Okay, so for many of you, since this is an advanced webinar, we all know what HARTH means and how it's related to our CoC funded programs. But in the event that you don't, we do encourage you to review the Hearth Act and the CoC interim rule. There is a hyperlink in the webinar presentation that was sent out. So we do encourage you to review that. That is contains helpful information about your eligibility and kind of what is allowable expenses for your HUD CoC grant. So we do encourage you to review those in the event that you do not know what that is. So as we know, we have received funds. Funds have been allowed for this upcoming HUD CoC competition. So for this fiscal year 2017, there is $2 billion awarded for the HUD CoC funding competition. This year is slightly different because we are seeing that the NOFA within itself does emphasize on system performance, and we actually do see that the project applications are slightly different than previous years because that outcome performance section that you used to report on is no longer seen in that. So the CoC application that All Chicago completes with, along with key external stakeholders, we do have to focus more on the system performance. So we'll be able to have that in the essay part, and that won't necessarily be one of the responsibilities you will have to complete in your project application. On your screen, you'll see an overview of the process. So you will have to complete the project applications for all HUD-funded renewal projects and new projects. For the purpose of this presentation, we will only be focusing on renewal projects. So once we have gone to the CoC board regarding the new projects, there will be an additional information for those agencies that will be following the new project process. Once you have gone ahead and submitted all your renewal project applications, the collaborative applicant, which is All Chicago, us, will collect and review all the applications. In conjunction, we will be completing the CoC application. But for you, once you have submitted all your project applications, we will be providing feedback just to make sure that we are all speaking the same language. And then finally, All Chicago will submit the project applications and CoC applications as one consolidated application to HUD before or by September 28th, which is the deadline for the NOFA. So a couple of important process notes. The NOFA did stipulate in it that all project applications are due 30 days in advance to the deadline. So even though the NOFA, the consolidated application, is due to HUD by September 28th, all project applications are due in eSNAP 30 days before. So this is why we have somewhat of a different timeline for you that we'll be going over further along in the presentation. Similar to previous years, HUD may issue up to 2 conditional funding announcements. So for those projects that have a start date in the first quarter of the year, we do encourage you to plan ahead to continue to operate your grant without drawing down money from HUD for a few months. We have seen this in the last 2 years, so we just do encourage all our agencies to be mindful of this in the event that you do have a start date in the first quarter of the year. Okay. So before we dive into the details, we're just going to go ahead and talk about the deadline. So by August 7th, so next Monday by noon, we do expect all applicant profiles and project applications due in a PDF form via Survey Gizmo to All Chicago. This will give us an opportunity to review all of those and provide feedback to each individual project. Once we send out the feedback, you'll have a chance to implement any of those changes in eSNAP and submit your final project application by August 17th by noon. And that one will actually go through eSNAP. But for now, we will be focusing on doing a PDF version so that way we can review and provide you feedback. Unfortunately, this is a timeline that has been established based on the NOFA and the HUD requirements. So unfortunately, we do not have the opportunity to provide any deadline extensions. So we do understand that it is the summer and many staff members may have taken some vacation. So we do apologize for that, but unfortunately, we have no control over these timelines. So if you do have some Difficulties with this, please contact us as soon as possible. All Chicago does have copies of previous submitted project applications, and we'll be more than happy to be able to assist in any possible way that we can. So a few changes that we saw in this year's NOFA. The renewal project applications will work slightly different than previous competitions. For the first time, you do have the ability to import data from fiscal year 2016. We will say that depending if you choose to follow this option, your screens may look slightly different. So just be mindful of that. And we'll cover that, and we also have resources to kind of allow, to help you look ahead of time to see how those screens will look different and what you have to do to navigate through them. An additional change has been that a lot of the attachments that we've seen in previous competitions are now pre-populated. So your HUD 2880, your certification for drug-free workplace, and your disclosure of lobbying forms have now been pre-populated. Some of them are kind of split in two, so you'll see some questions asked in the applicant profile and the second half in your project application. So don't worry, it does look a little bit wonky, but of course this is the first time, so that is to be anticipated. Another big change that we saw is in the NOFA for a permanent supportive housing project, there is a new concept called Dedicated Plus. It is something regarding chronic homeless, the expansion eligibility for that, and we'll be discussing that more a little bit further in our presentation. However, for the moment, we will be presenting this to the CoC board in their upcoming meeting next week. So we do encourage all permanent supportive housing projects that feel that maybe this is an option that you would want to pursue to review the NOFA to determine what this actually means, and to see if this is something that your specific agency would like to pursue. Once the CoC board meeting has occurred, we'll provide information back to those agencies that did express an interest in pursuing this option and letting you know kind of any next steps for that. And finally, there were some eligibility requirement changes for our rapid rehousing models. So if you do have a rapid rehousing model, please, I encourage you to review the NOFA to just determine what those are. So we received a quick question here. We're going to take a minute and try to answer it. So question was submitted. I noticed in eSNAP that there is only one form HUD 2880 available. However, we must submit one for each project. Will there be a pre-populated HUD 2880 for each of our projects? Great question. So yes, I believe this form, the HUD 2880, it's one of the forms that's split up in two sections. So one of the versions, you'll kind of ask some preliminary questions in the applicant profile, and then later for our projects that have multiple projects that they're applying for, you'll have to answer the remaining questions for each of those. We know this is kind of funky because there is one question in that form that will pre-populate information based on your project applications. So maybe since one of the first steps is that you have to update your applicant profile, you will see that there's maybe a 0 there, and it may cause some concern for you. So just make sure that as you're going into your project applications and updating that funding section for that, that you go back into your applicant profile to make sure that that amount has been updated. The other comments that were submitted was just clarifying that the CoC board meeting is in fact in 2 weeks on August 16th. So thank you for that. I think we were thinking about the deadline for what needs to go to the board by next week. Yes, thank you for that. All right, so we're gonna move on to HUD resources, but thank you for those who submitted questions. And again, feel free to do that throughout.
it looks like maybe we have one more quick. Somebody was raising their hand, but I don't see it. So we're going to move on. Please feel free to use the chat box, and we'll come back to those. So I'm just going to, this is Renee Crowley speaking. I'm going to go over some of the HUD resources. So first, what you see on your screen is the HUD Exchange website, where you would specifically find information about the CoC program, NOFA. Please feel free to go here to find some of the instructional guides and resources that have been released. As new ones come out, we continue to post them to our website as well, but please feel free to use this as a resource. They also have a frequently asked questions page. This is extremely helpful. There's things in the NOFA that it seems like you have a lot of questions. What we've done is just done a quick search of a keyword, and we've been able to see other continuums submit similar questions that we have and learn from those. So feel free to use the frequently asked questions, and as we see some that are really helpful, we'll pull some of those out as well. And then the Ask a Question is also on this link. That is where we typically would submit and ask a question on our behalf, but it is open for anyone to use that. And in addition, if you get locked out of eSnaps and you need your password reset, you would be able to go here at the Ask a Question to get it reset. So it's a little funky. I had to do it myself, so this is a really important link in case you need it. Okay, so this is just a screen to show you that when you're on the HUD Exchange, you have to click around a few different times to get some of those instructional guides that we were talking about. So there's the CoC program competition at the bottom there is highlighted more in blue for the project applicants. That's where your resources will be, and then you can see that there's a budget instructional guide, a project application instructional guide, and the renewal project application detailed instructions and instructional guide. These are extremely helpful resources that we have on our website as well. But if more are posted, this is where you would find them. All right. So then we have a screenshot here of the All Chicago CoC funded projects page on our website. This is where we are posting everything that will be helpful for you guys regarding this competition. The project applicant profile instructional guide is the first link you see there. This is incredibly important because the applicant profile is the first step in order to be able to move on through the application. Also, if you have any new users or users that you need to delete out of eSnaps, that first profile instructional guide is where you will find those step-by-step process. You'll also see that we have the renewal project application instructional guide in addition to the detailed instructions. So if you're getting caught up on a certain question, that detailed instructions is extremely helpful to walk you through, and it has some screenshots of eSnaps in there. And then there's a specific instructional guide just related to the budget. This is also what you can see on the website here is the trainings, the webinar this morning, and the in-person training. We'll make sure to post the recording, and that will end up being on our resources as well. And then we also will be reviewing some additional resources as we get them. We continue to add them here. So if you went to our website right now, you would see a few more things on there, including the GIW and a checklist. And here's the checklist. So each year we kind of try to look through all of those different instructional guides, look at all of the different steps throughout this process, and try to put one consolidated checklist together for you as a resource that you may use. And this is something that we encourage you to just kind of use throughout as you're filling it out, and or at the end to confirm that you have submitted each section. We've included some important notes on the checklist and some of the resources, including some of the links. So feel free, this is posted to our website as well. Feel free to use this. Of course, if you have multiple projects, you would fill this out per project.
Just a quick note about that. We do not anticipate you to submit a checklist when you upload your project application. This is really more as a resource for you to ensure that you're answering all the correct information and also selecting options that perhaps pertain to all of us here in Chicago. So again, completely up to your discretion. We do hope that this is a useful checklist for you, since we do know that HUD has multiple instruction guides that can seem overwhelming. We hope that this will, be somewhat of a useful document for you.
Can you go back one slide? There we go. Great. So just lastly here with resources, we just wanted to highlight a few of what you can use us for, but what you can also use the HUD resource websites for that we went over. So please reach out to the virtual help desk or the HUD Exchange for training modules or the frequently asked questions. Specifically, if you're having any technical problems with eSnaps, that's not something that we're going to be able to help with. We know that the system might be running slow since everybody will be using the system around the same time due to the timeline that HUD released. But please, if there are any eSnaps technical problems, reach out to the HUD Exchange, and then of course, as I mentioned, use the AAQ if you get locked out of eSnaps, or if you have any problems accessing eSnaps. Also, if you just can't remember how to access the applicant profile or find applications in eSnaps, we're not able to necessarily see what you see. So that's probably something that you'll have to reach out to them for some help for. However, we are here to help with as much as we can help with. So if you're having some non-technical problems with eSnaps, please feel free to reach out to us. If you're unsure about your project budget amounts or any type of policies or priorities that have been set by our local CoC board of directors, or any issues accessing Survey Gizmo, or just general questions, please feel free to reach out to us. There's and also information about deadlines. We did release a CoC competition calendar that's on our website, so that's a resource that can be used as well. And at the bottom here, you can see to use the CoC programs at allchicago.org. That goes to our entire CoC team, so we're able to respond more quickly and see your email right away. So we'll be definitely looking at that pretty frequently throughout the next couple of months. Great, so I'm going to just go over some of the project application steps pretty quickly. Here we have the 4-step process. First, you will create your project applicant profile. You'll then go on to your funding opportunity registration. That's a very quick step, but an important step. And then you will go ahead and create your project application, and then you're able to access the application through the submission. What you'll see at the right-hand side is that you have to navigate through the menu. I know this is the advanced webinar, so you guys are probably used to doing that, but it's just a good reminder to make sure that you'll be navigating through that left-hand screen of the menu in eSnaps to get to the different sections. It's also important to note that you do have to do these steps in order for the pre-populated questions to appear. So if for some reason you're trying to click on something and you're not seeing it, that's probably why. Okay, so as we mentioned before, there is a full set of instructions for creating the applicant profile, and that's posted on HUD Exchange and our website. And again, the applicant profile must be updated before starting the application process. And so only after doing so will a project applicant be able to advance successfully to the project application in eSnaps. So just a quick reminder. Yes. Oh, there's a question. Yeah.
So we have a question. Someone asked, do you update your agency profile via Survey Gizmo prior to updating your profile in eSnap?
No, please go ahead and do everything in eSnap. Survey Gizmo, we just want the submissions, the PDF export out of eSnap submitted to us. And you do have to do a little bit of double entry so we know which projects and who you are in Survey Gizmo, but please do that in eSnap. Great question.
Yes, I think we had this similar question pop up during our beginners training. So I think people are thinking about the local evaluation process in Survey Gizmo where you actually see the questions pop up. For this purpose, since all the questions are in eSnaps and you have to submit via eSnaps to HUD, we do ask you to answer all the questions, everything that's showing through eSnaps. So you update your applicant profile through there and the project application will show in eSnaps, and you will just be exporting a PDF to submit via Survey Gizmo. Thank you for the question, Alvina.
All right, so we just wanted to highlight potentially a common mistake here, which is to make sure that you put the applicant profile in edit mode so that you can push the complete button in order to move on to the next section. We've noticed that some people will see the edit mode button or some people will see the complete button. And so depending on what you see, you will have to kind of mess around with eSnaps a little bit to make sure that you get it in edit mode so that you can push complete for this time frame. Great, so the next step is pretty brief but really important. Step 2 is to register for the funding opportunity. So as I mentioned before, you would navigate on the left-hand side of your screen. You can see we've highlighted Select Funding Opportunity Registration. You'll want to click there in eSnaps, and then you'll click on that little paper with the red checkbox next to the Renewal Project Application for fiscal year 2017. This is incredibly important that you're submitting for the renewal, not a new project, and that you're submitting for fiscal year 2017 and not 2016. So please make sure that you're paying very close attention to this detail as you're registering for the funding opportunity. Great. So then that's all you'll have to do for step 2. You will then go back to your menu screen, which we don't have the image on here, but you'll go back to projects and select the renewal project application fiscal year 2017. So that's the one that you just registered for, and you'll do that from the funding opportunity name drop down. There's a few different ways that you can sort this page to make sure that you get to the right one. So if you don't do it that way, that's okay too, but just make sure that you are selecting the one that you just registered for. Once the screen refreshes, it will appear empty, and then you'll click on that little paper with the checkbox icon to add your project. It's very important that you're entering the specific project name exactly as it appears on your grants inventory worksheet and your HUD contracts. If for some reason there's a discrepancy, that would be something you could reach out to us and we could help you problem solve. But ultimately it should be matching your grants inventory worksheet, and this would really not be the time to be make any adjustments or getting that changed. And then this is where you'll also see the option to do the import data from field. If you were to use this, please be very careful. For some of you that have multiple projects, be mindful of which project from 2016 you would be selecting from. So you want to make sure that they would match, and so that you're selecting the right one to be renewed. And then you would click and save and add another if your agency has more than one project. Otherwise, you can click and actually save, and the little icon that says save and back.
So we have a question. Should we use the old GIW or will you send out a new one?
The GIW for fiscal year 2017 is on our website. That is the one that we would be using. That's the one that was confirmed by HUD through the GIW process a couple of months ago.
Yeah. So in addition to the reminders that we send out, we will also be sharing kind of hyperlinks in the emails. So if you're unsure, if you're looking at the right one, you could go to the All Chicago website and click on the NOFA page, or two, we will be sending out email reminders, and we will also be sending out an email after this presentation just with hyperlinks to some of the resources that we identified during the presentation.
Okay. All right, so if you do decide to choose the importing data function, well, I guess most importantly, you have the choice. You can do it or you don't have to. HUD recommends it throughout the instructional guides, but this is the first time that it's been offered, so we do want you to make the decision that feels best for you. What we do know is that there will be different screens that will be appearing depending on which option you select. And we also absolutely know that if you import the data, you must review all of the data that is in there very closely, and then edit anything or change it if it appears to be outdated. What we do know is there will be some edits made, so we don't want people to import fiscal year 2016 and just push submit. However, if you choose the import data function, you will be unable to edit most of the application screens until you navigate to the submission without changes screen. So we don't want people to get concerned. You will go in there, you would have to look at the pages. When you get to the submission screen, then you would select make changes, and then you can go back through all of the other pages and make the edits that you know you need to make.
So we have a question. Patricia asked, will data for former Shelter Plus Care projects funded by DFSS, now HUD CoC, come over on the renewal application? So for a lot of our Shelter Plus Care projects, as you may recall, last year, or previous to last year, many of you submitted your renewal application. DFSS was the lead entity in kind of submitting those renewal applications. Last year was the first year that you were able to submit a renewal application under your agency name. So we anticipate that you should be able to import data from fiscal year 2016. If for some reason that option is not available for you, we do have one Shelter Plus Care project that is a first-time renewal. So for those first-time renewals, you will not have the option to import data. So if that is applicable to you, you will, unfortunately have to kind of go through a blank screen and answer all the questions. So if you have additional questions for my Shelter Plus Care project, you can always feel free to reach out to us.
Great. I did want to. You can go to the next slide. I wanted to make this important note as well, is that, we will have a poll here in a second. So as Liz is getting the poll ready, I just wanted to make a note that you make sure that you have two options to do an authorized contact and an alternative contact. And your authorized contact, when you're doing the project or the applicant profile, so the alternate contact will be the one that will be getting a lot of the questions. Your authorized contact would be the one really signing off on it. So I know you guys are advanced and you might already know that, but we just wanted to make sure that we highlight that as well. All right, so I think Liz is going to bring us into a poll. So we want to know, are you considering the importing data option? We know maybe some of this is new to some of you, but we'd like to get a sense from the group.
All right. It seems like everyone's answered. And it's pretty much I have a tie. So we have 56 of you that are definitely using the import data. 2% are thinking, no, you will not, while 41, you're still not sure. And that's okay. We know that the NOFA was just released a few weeks ago, and HUD, put up their detailed instructions and their guides up last week. One thing we will note is that HUD is recommending for project renewals to import their data, but we do encourage you to review the detailed instructions to kind of see how the different screens will show and what information you actually have to update. And of course, we are here to help you with any questions that we can.
Great. So I'm just going to wrap up the 4 steps that we outlined. So after you get through step 3, you will go to step 4, which is the submission. This is, again, navigating to the submissions workspace on the left-hand side of your menu. And you can utilize the filter or sorting functions to find the correct submission again. So once again, you'll be either using the search for the renewal project application for fiscal year 2017, or you can do the open projects for your project status, and typically then you can find those that haven't been submitted yet. And then you'll be able to click on that little folder icon to access the submission, and this is 1 per project. So we're gonna actually go over, oh, we have a question?
Yes, so there's a question about the alternative contact. So is there an option to add a 3rd contact? Unfortunately, no, it's only the authorized rep and your alternate contact. So we do encourage you to view what's been submitted in the past to also see what, and if that's still applicable. An additional question is, will there be an option to edit the imported data? So you will have an option to edit the imported data. Just as Renee was speaking about it, you just have to navigate through a few other screens before you edit it. So you shouldn't be alarmed if as soon as you import the data, it looks like you cannot edit it. You just have to go to the submission summary page and make some changes there in order to go back into the application and edit it. So I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but you do have the chance to do that. For those of you that are raising your hand, if you could just please put your hand down and submit your question via the chat box. We do know that we only have an hour, so it is a lot of information, so we'll try to answer your question. If we don't have a chance to answer your question during the webinar, we will send out a frequently asked questions, so that way everyone has the opportunity to view what the questions were and the responses.
Great. So the project application is eight sections this year. What you'll see in section 1 is an overview of some of the pre-populated forms, and then you'll see to the right on here are the other sections. What we did notice is that you do need to fill out section 1 in order for those other sections to populate. So again, don't feel alarmed if you get in there and you don't see all 8 sections right away. We're going to walk through each section, and for the sake of time, we'll just move on so we can get into the part 1. So this is a condensed version of part 1 for this training. What you'll see is you need to ensure that you have the correct application type and ensure the type is indicated as renewal. You'll also notice that a lot of fields are already pre-populated, and so on this screen, you'll only be able to see 5B as an editable field. This is where you'll enter the first 6 digits of your expiring grant number for this specific project. This is what you'll look at the fiscal year 2017 GIW to make sure that you have the right 6 digits of the expiring grant number. You'll also see that there is congressional districts. A project renewing must have a proposed start date in calendar year 2017 and an end date in calendar year 2018. Some of this, again, you'll see some pre-populated information from the applicant profile and then for congressional districts, and you'll also see some that you'll be able to enter specific for this project. If for some reason there are any things that you need to make you see errors in the stuff that's pre-populated, you'll have to go back to the applicant profile. You won't be able to make the edit here. We also wanted to point out for section 1E, the compliance, question 19, for Chicago, we must select B. And this is that the program is subject to EO 12372, but has not been selected by the state for review. Part 2 is a section that needs to be completed if your agency receives funds and then re-grants the funds to other agencies. So if you have any sub-recipients, the project applicants are not required to complete if there are no sub-recipients, so it's okay if you need to skip this option. If you do have sub-recipients, the instructional guide and the detailed instructional guide has a long list of those additional questions that will be populated if you select yes here. What you'll also see in part 2 is the APR submissions, a few questions here that talks about the recipient performance. So it'll ask about if you've successfully submitted your APRs on time. Also, if you have had any HUD monitoring audit findings. You'll also see the quarterly drawdowns and expenditure of funds. So please just go ahead and select your answers here. Depending on your answers, you may see some conditional formatting that would make you answer some additional questions if it applies. I apologize.
Okay, so before we dive into part A, we just want to take a note that there was a question. Our website currently says that the checklist is coming soon. We will be posting the checklist right after this webinar, and we'll be sending out an email with all those links. So thank you for that. There's been some additional questions on how does your submission of the APR with the new Sage tool affect this question. It appears that there's been some problems with submitting the APR. So I think one of the questions is, has the recipient successfully submitted their APRs on time? If for some reason you did not submit on time, despite the problems with Sage, you know, you'll get a narrative question, like a pop-up where you can submit some additional information as to what led you to not submit your APR. If you still have not come up and are maybe working through those issues, I think this question refers to your latest APR. So maybe your next APR is due at the end of September or October and are working on it. But I do know that HUD is conscious of Sage being a new system for the APR, and they have been working out some kinks. So just feel free to, provide any information if the deadline did pass and it required you to submit late, to kind of provide an explanation what those issues were with Sage. And if not, and if the latest APR was submitted on time, just go ahead and affirm that you did submit on time. Okay. The next section, part 3A, is your project details. So one very important, this is the Chicago CoC, so please make sure to select Illinois 510 Chicago. Very important because if you submit any other CoC, we will not be able to see it, and therefore it will not be part of our consolidated application. And if you do submit to another CoC, we will have to reach out to that CoC to get your application back. So it's very important that you select the correct CoC. In addition, the CoC applicant name, so that is us. Our entire name is All Chicago Making Homelessness History. For some of us that have been around through the merger, I know we'll be looking for like the Chicago Alliance. So just make sure that you are selecting All Chicago Making Homelessness History, since that is our official name. All our projects will be selecting standard, and then you will be asked to select your component type. Please make sure that you select the correct component type because this is linked up with the rest of the application, and specific questions will not be made available to you if you do not select the correct component type. And then finally, make sure to answer whether this project uses one or more properties that have been conveyed through the Title V process. It has come to be my experience that many of you that do not know what a Title V is usually have not gone through that. But in the event that you're not sure, we do encourage you to check in with your grant individuals just to make sure that you are selecting the correct response for this question. So similar to last year, you will be asked for a project description, and this is the only opportunity that you have to provide a narrative that describes your specific project. And we really want you to focus on describing the need. So as we all know, HUD is really looking to see how each of our projects contribute to ending homelessness. So please, we do encourage you to describe the need. Why is your project needed in Chicago? If you are identifying any target population, who are you serving? Your project plan, so what type of project are you? What is your bed and units? What does that setup look like? And what do you expect to accomplish? So are you looking at individuals remaining permanently housed and so forth? As we have seen, HUD is really looking to see how we are coordinating with other providers, since we do understand that you do collaborate with a lot of partners as far as, you know, maybe setting up mainstream benefits or transportation and so forth. So you do have an option. If you do not directly provide those services, you can indicate whether it's a subrecipient or a partner through a linkage or maybe a non-partner that you just work very closely with. And then you'll be asked it. I'm sorry, I'm skipping into other pages. So also please encourage to indicate why those dollars are needed for this project. You can reference other parts of the application, and this is where my mind was going to in a minute. You know, for those coordination, there is another section that is coming up that you can speak to the frequency and those linkage agreements that you have. So you can always feel free to reference because this section in particular does have a character limit. So we do encourage you to use Microsoft Word, and that way you can write out your entire narrative in the event that you chose not to import data. And then just pop it into eSnaps, because eSnaps does lock you out after 5 minutes of inactivity. Unfortunately, it does not view your typing into the narrative section as an activity. It may lock you out, which will cause you to lose your narrative. So we do encourage you to write it out in Word prior to entering it into eSnaps. And also, if you reach into a character limit, feel free to use special symbols like the and symbol as a shorthand way to, instead of writing out and. One important note that we will make is make sure that your information does not conflict with other parts of the application. And we cannot stress this enough. Be sure to review what your description says for those of you that have imported, and review the other parts of the application. We have found that many project applications, when we receive the first time around, there will be conflict as far as the number of beds and units, your target population, the linkage agreements, and so forth. So just make sure that you're looking at that as a whole to make sure there's no conflicting parts. You will have the opportunity to specify if there's a specific population that you serve. One thing we will note about this is that you should answer yes if your project has one or more of the following. If your project has a special capacity in its facility, if it has a special program design, some tools, outreach, or methodologies for these specific populations. I like to use the example of youth. So as we know, a lot of our youth providers have a specific program design and outreach and methodologies that they use in working with youth that are experiencing homelessness. If it so happens that in your project you just happen to be serving those and don't have any of the mentioned criteria, please do not select a population for that. We do understand that you do serve those individuals that are experiencing those type of specific populations, but just make sure that you are mindful as to what HUD means when they mention a specific population. And again, make sure that this does not conflict with any parts of the application. One thing that we did see last year was that we had a lot of projects select all the possible specific populations, but in their narrative, they only mentioned that they serve chronic homeless. So just make sure that you're looking at that. And since it is together on the page, it helps itself to kind of review on that same screen. The project application will also ask if you are a housing first project. So that means that you're moving participants quickly into permanent housing, and then it has a list of, whether your project ensures that participants are not being screened out based on a few items listed, and whether they're not being terminated for any of the following reasons. We will make a note that question D does pre-populate. So if you fail to select a couple of those items, that will automatically change to no. So just make sure that you select them. If for some reason you are not following any of those, feel free to check in with us. We can explain kind of what the criteria means. Great. So we are mindful that we have 10 minutes to go, and we still have quite a bit to go. So I will rush a little bit through. So additional questions will appear regarding your different project types. So permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, SSOs, you will have additional questions that show up specifically for your type. For my permanent housing projects, you will be asked whether you receive rental assistance as a budget line item. If you do, please make sure you select that, and make sure that you do have an actual rental assistance line on the GIW. Again, the project application stage is not the stage to make some changes and move budget money from one area to the other. You will need a grant amendment if you require to do that. Coordinated entry SSOs will have further questions that will be seen on this screen.
All right, so as we mentioned before, new in fiscal year 2017 is this dedicated plus option. So as you're going through, if you are a PSH provider, you're going to see that you have this additional option to select. If you're, and so basically you're going to see 3 different options. If you're a PSH provider, you can select 100% dedicated, you can select dedicated plus, or NA. For those that are already 100% dedicated, you would only have the 2 options to either do 100% dedicated or dedicated plus. NA would be to just operate as usual, no changes made. As we mentioned before, this is something that we're looking into a little bit further and further understanding the dedicated plus. But at this time, we would just encourage you to do some research in the NOFA and the instructional guide. And if it's something that you want to select, you can do so at this time. For part 4, you'll move on to housing and services. You're going to see a list of supportive services on the screen, and you're going to be asked to identify what provider provides it and the frequency that it's being provided. So there's a list on your screen right now of what some of those are. The provider could be the applicant, you, or the subrecipient, a partner, or a non-partner. So those would be your 4 options in your drop-down for what the provider might be. You're also going to see housing type and location. This is going to be different depending on what you selected in the type component type of 3A. So again, this is something that you'll be able to fill in based on what you've seen earlier in the application. When you do select here, you'll have the option to put in the beds and the units and reflect this at your full capacity, not necessarily just like the single point in time. You'll be able to add new housing types and location details by clicking that paper box and the little checkbox. But you must choose the housing type from options which most closely resembles your project. And then again, you'll have to enter your beds and the unit's address. And then most importantly here, make sure that we're selecting the Chicago geocode, which is 171296. And then for permanent supportive housing only, you'll be able to also, outside of the dedicated plus and the 100% dedicated, you'll also be prompted here to indicate the number of beds that are dedicated for chronic homeless individuals and families, beds likely to be available upon turnover, and then the beds to be prioritized upon turnover. We have some information below in this slide to help fill that out, but if there are questions, please feel free to reach out to us. At the bottom there, it does say, like, once beds are dedicated or prioritized, the project must continue to dedicate these beds to chronic homeless. So if they were dedicated in fiscal year 16, they must remain dedicated. But we know that dedicated plus might make that a little bit confusing. So we're here to help and problem solve with you.
Okay. Part 5, your participant and outreach information. So make sure about this part that you're entering data based at a point in time. And we would like for you to base that point when your project was at full capacity. So please do not enter information over a course of a year or over the term of the grant year. It's based on one point in time and if you were as if you were at full capacity. Some of the areas are not applicable. The light gray areas is for auto calculating. So just make sure if you're trying to edit some of those sections, you won't be able to do so. You'll also be asked about chronic substance abuse, so that may also constitute as a disability. And we do encourage you to use your HMIS art reports to complete this section. If you're having problems with your art report, please reach out first to your agency technical administrator, which is your ATA. And if they are unable to resolve the issue, you can always feel free to contact our HMIS team for assistance. On your screen, you'll kind of see what the difference is between screen A and screen B. So it kind of shows how you're supposed to report on those different screens. So we do encourage you to review the detailed questions. It does have a lot of information about how you should be answering those and when to group them together as a household. There is a new distinction between adults or youth. So youth from ages 18 to 24 will be asked to separate those out from the other adults over the age of 24. You will also be asked outreach for participants. So contrary to previous years, if the percentage did not equal to 100%, you would have an opportunity to answer why you were at a 95%. That is not the option this year, so you must ensure that everything equals out to 100%. Please note that there will be some sections that will not be available to you, and that is based on previous selections in the previous screen. So the funding part, part 6. So new this year, HUD is no longer requiring renewals to list out detailed descriptions and qualities for specific budget line items. You just have to ensure that you are entering the correct amount. We do encourage you to review the final grants inventory worksheet, the GIW, that's posted on our website for details on the budget amendments, for the budget amounts, I mean. If you did have some changes that occurred between the final grants inventory worksheet to now, please reach out to us. We will ask you for a grant amendment just to make sure that that has been finalized and to make sure that we are adequately capturing that. For those of you that did a grant consolidation earlier this year, maybe last month or so, please make sure that it is reflective of what your current grant agreement is it has been amendment. Many of you reported the consolidation during the GIW stage. So just make sure that if you did not do that, let us know. If you have not done a consolidated amendment but are thinking about it, or maybe are in the beginning stages, if you have not executed that by September 28th, you must submit a separate individual grant application. So I would say if you have not actually executed that consolidated as of now, you will have to submit a separate individual renewal grant. So your budget information, so you must select what budget line items you have for your specific grant. All of these budget items must match the GIW. If you fail to select one of the budget line items on the screen that you are seeing, the questions will not pop up. So just make sure that you're reviewing and checking off the appropriate boxes. Please do not select a box that you do not have a budget money for it, because this is not the time to start moving money around. For those of you that have leased units, just make sure that you are selecting the Illinois, Chicago, Joliet, and Naperville as a metropolitan fair market rent area. Be sure that that you're listing the number of units and the appropriate bedroom configurations. Similar to how we've been mentioning, just make sure that you're looking at your narrative and mentioning the same number of units and beds as you are here, so that way you're not contradicting yourself. And again, for leased structure, supportive services, operating, or budget, HMIS budget line items, you do not need to make a detailed itemized list as to what all that means. In 6H, you will be required to submit your match. So this is based on your current commitment and not your projection. So just make sure that you are conscious of that and that you're covering the requested grant operating period. Leverage has been removed from the project application, so there is no need to include that right now. A new policy update that we saw in the CoC NOFA is that program income can now be counted as match funds. So we do encourage you to review the NOFA for additional guidance on that. After you've completed all your specific budget line items amounts, you will arrive at the summary budget, and all of this information will pre-populate based on the information that you've entered, everything except your admin amount. Your admin is up to 10%, but it must match what you submitted during your GIW stage. So for many of you, you increased your admin amount, but decreased in other budget line items. So just make sure that that is represented as it is on the GIW. All right, this is probably one of the final steps. So thank you all. I know we're rushing through it, so we do apologize, and we're a little bit over, but we'll be just taking up a few more minutes. The next screen will show the voluntary reallocation during the local evaluation process. So as many of you may remember, during our local evaluation process, we introduced the question of whether you wanted to reallocate some funds, maybe some funds that you were not able to spend down for the last few years. So those funds, we are considering that a reallocation. So for those of you that indicated that yes, you will be voluntarily doing this permanent reallocation, we'll select yes to the first question. And this will allow us to use that money to create new projects to introduce for the City of Chicago. The next section will ask you if you wish to submit this application without any changes. So this is very important that once you make a selection here, you will not be able to change it. And then as you can see, if you select make changes, you will have to specify what area in the application you selected, you made a change, and briefly mention it below. So as you can see, they do ask for bullet points. So just make sure if you made some updates to your budget that you're indicating that here, and you're just checking off part 6 of the budget information. Then you will, the next screen is your submission summary. Make sure that all the areas are complete. As you can see on your screen, there are some areas that say please complete, and it's followed by a red X. The nice thing is that you can kind of click on that section and it'll take you directly to that section in the project application to view what is needed. There will be a notes section right below that, and it'll indicate exactly what is missing. As you can see in the example on your screen, the applicant profile was not marked as complete, so we wouldn't be able to submit it because it was left open. And then it goes on into like detailed information as to what else is needed. So we do encourage you to view that just to make, so that way you are aware what needs to be completed in your project application. Next, for the first review, you will be exporting a PDF. So on that same screen, you'll see a submission button and also an export to PDF. Please utilize the export to PDF and do not submit at this point. For anyone that submits, we will be releasing it. And the reason why is if you submit at this stage and we give you feedback, you will not be able to make any changes. So that's why we ask for a PDF version, so that way as soon as you get the feedback, you're able to go into eSnaps and make those applicable changes. All right. So let's go over kind of what the next steps are to follow after this webinar. So the link on your screen is the link to the Survey Gizmo. So this is where you'll be submitting your first draft of your applicant profile and your project application. We will be asking for some agency contact information. So this is the person who is completing the application and who, you know, if we send back the feedback, we'll know what we're talking about. You'll be listing your agency name and you'll be updating your applicant profile. It'll ask you how many the number of CoC funded projects that you have. And this is because it triggers kind of multiple pages, since we know some of our agencies only have one CoC funded grant, so they'll only have to submit one applicant profile and one project application. However, there's other agencies that have multiple. So those will have to submit one applicant profile and 5 project applications or so forth. So once you indicate the number of funded projects that you have, you'll be able to see that screen over and over again. For your project, you'll please indicate the name as it's listed on your GIW. Please do not, change the name for us. It does get a little bit confusing for us if you choose to select a different name as it's listed on the GIW. We want to ensure that we are capturing all the HUD CoC renewal ones so that way you can continue to receive funding. We will ask for an HMIS ID number. This is probably what you've entered during the local evaluation process. So if you are unaware, we do encourage you to review what you submitted during the local evaluation process. Then we'll ask for the grant number as it's listed on the GIW. And then finally, you'll be uploading a PDF of your project application. We will ask for some additional questions, such as who is your local HUD representative and if you've executed your fiscal year 2016 grant agreement. We do know that there are a few of you out there that have not executed your fiscal year 2016, so please indicate no. If you have not, we want to know how many of those are out there. And finally, if you had any grant amendments, please make sure that you upload those as well. So as I mentioned before, right now is not the stage to submit an eSNAP. So as you update your applicant profile and your project application, do not hit submit in eSNAP. So you will export a version. We do encourage you to download the All Chicago Review Checklist just to make sure that you're hitting all those important points. And then you'll submit a PDF of the applicant profile and project application to All Chicago through the Survey Gizmo. Again, we will be sending out the Survey Gizmo link again via email for easy access for everyone. All PDF copies are due in Survey Gizmo no later than Monday, August 7th by noon. So that's next Monday. Following that, All Chicago will be providing feedback to the agency for each project. So we anticipate giving everyone their feedback by Friday, August 11th. You will then have a chance to make the changes in eSNAP based on the feedback that we provided. In the feedback form that we send out, you will see the next steps, and you will have the opportunity then to submit an eSNAP and notify us of your submission. We do want all the project applications and eSNAPs no later than Thursday, August 17th by noon. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at the cocprograms@allchicago.org. As Renee mentioned earlier, we are all connected. This is a shared inbox. So in the event that one of us is not in the office or out in a meeting, someone else in the office will have the opportunity to respond to you, since we do know this is a quick turnaround time. So we want to be sensitive to your needs and be able to provide you with as much information as we can as soon as possible.
So thank you for those who have stayed on the line. We're going to continue to go through the questions that have been submitted. If you have more, please use the chat function. At this time, though, we have finished, concluded our PowerPoint slides. So one question, is there a match percentage?
Yes, great question. So you do have to have your 25% match. So similar as how it's been indicated in your grants, just make sure that you are listing that at least that 25% match.
And a similar question about match requirements says, what does it mean to have the match based on current commitments? We do not yet have commitments for the renewing grants or in-kind sources for 2018-2019 since the HUD notice submitted a year in advance for some of our projects?
Yeah. So based on your current commitments, so HUD does indicate in the instructions that those commitments are based on your fiscal year 2016. So everyone should have those 2016 commitments. So just make sure that you're listing those out because I think HUD understands that sometimes we project some commitments that fall through. So they want to review what is an accurate description of, your current commitments for match.
Another question is there anything that we are required to do for a grant that has been merged with another grant, but is the expiring grant? Do we need to zero it out?
Nope. So that's a great question. So for those of you that grant consolidated, on the final GIW that we submitted to HUD, that's actually where those were zeroed out. So for this renewal application, you will be now reporting on both of them in a sense, and will not have to submit a project application for that one that is retiring.
Great. We had a question about a grant amendment, but hopefully we clarified that. If not, please feel free to ask again. There was another question about Dedicated Plus. Can we move to Dedicated Plus when vacancies arise if there are existing participants who don't meet the criteria? I think the question is a little bit unclear to us. So if you could please maybe try to reword it, just so I could take a stab at it, but I'm afraid that I might be misunderstanding the specific question. For any vacancies right now, those would be filled through our coordinated entry system, unless you're talking about a family provider. And so the prioritization is established, and those are the matches that you would be receiving. And so again, without specifically knowing your project, I'm not sure I can give the best answer, but for those that are being matched to permanent supportive housing right now, they would be meeting the current chronic homeless definition. There's another question. If we have a written APR extension from our local HUD office due to problems on HUD's end, does that count as a late APR submission?
So that's a great question. We'll follow up with you, Kathy, on that one. I just want to be sure. I know that's the devil in the detail kind of question. We can go ahead and review the guidance for you on that one, and if needed, submit a question to HUD, whether they would classify that as a late submission. My guess is not, since you submitted, HUD has approved the extension, but we just want to make sure that we are answering it correctly.
There was another question again about having two contacts receive feedback. I think if you mean for Survey Gizmo, I think we could understand that there could be like an exception based on what we're seeing in the chat box. As far as HUD having an authorized contact and an alternative contact, there isn't any wiggle room there. So if you need an additional contact for your Survey Gizmo feedback, I think that would be an appropriate exception that we can make. There was a question about what exactly will the board vote be, and these are things that will be going to some of the committees before it goes to the board. So at this time, we don't exactly know what the motion will be, and so we do recognize that we're saying that the board meeting is on the 16th and these final drafts are due the 17th. If there's anything like that requires quick turnaround or anything that needs to change, we will absolutely be reaching out to everybody and giving you a heads up about that. And then there was also a question about if there will be consideration in the evaluation tool. And so again, like this is something that I believe will be going to spec, and CASC, if not additional committees as well. Yeah, and so there's a lot of questions here around prioritizing turnover beds for chronic homelessness. That is currently still in place and is part of the matching criteria for coordinated entry. It looks like there will be some additional questions that reach out to us. So yes, please feel free. And again, as we said, if we're seeing a lot of similar questions, we'll be able to consolidate those and we can post some frequently asked questions. Are you going to provide the presentation by email, or are you going to provide, oh, it's the same question.
So yes, the presentation was emailed out earlier today. In conjunction, in the handout section of this webinar, you should be able to download that. But we will also be posting the slides of this presentation to our website as well for any colleagues of yours that did not have a chance to sit in on this webinar.
Great. So there's another question about where you can find the CoC All Chicago, where in the CoC All Chicago website can you find the 2017 GIW. You should be able to go to the CoC tab, and then when you're hovering over that tab, you'll click on NOFA, and that will be, it'll be on the NOFA page where it says fiscal year 2017 GIW. We'll make sure that that is sent out as well following the email, so you have a direct link. And then there's a question about new project work group decisions. So again, this was a webinar specific to renewal applications. We are aware that the new project work group is meeting, and those decisions will go to the board as well on the 16th, and we have a very, very quick turnaround deadline to work with those applicants to make sure that they get their project applications in as well. It appears at this time that we've gone over all of the questions that have been submitted. If you need clarity or need further follow-up, please feel free to reach out to the CoC programs email. We really appreciate everybody taking the extra time to stay on the line with us. And again, we will post the recording of this webinar as well.
Thank you all, and have a great day.